The European Union and Japan are to work more closely together to secure the supply of computer chips. The commitment will enable both sides to benefit from the other's research and expertise, as well as open the door to more mutual investment. Rising geopolitical tensions have prompted several major economies to replace some of their trade with China, a move known as de-risking. Here's how the EU's Internal Market Commissioner Thierry Breton explained the rationale behind deepening cooperation.
We have a strategy in China that we don't want to decouple, and we made it very clear. We just want to de-risk. If we see there's too much risk, too much dependencies with single source, we want to reduce this risk, and it covers many aspects like critical raw materials, some minerals, but also in semiconductors.
For more on this, let's bring in DW correspondent Christine Muhandwa. She's joining us from Brussels. Christine, we hear a lot about countries wanting to de-risk their relationship with China. How far does this agreement actually go towards that end?
Well, Kate, from an EU perspective, this is a big step in the direction that the European Union wants to take. That is, increasing its cooperation in the technology space with allied countries. That is, technology involving around artificial intelligence and, of course, this crucial strategic aspect of semiconductor chips. Really, you've got to look back to what happened with this global supply shortage just after the pandemic, where factories in Europe producing cars, electronics, health devices were basically brought to a standstill because of a lack of supply of these semiconductor chips. This was a wake-up call for the European Union. And as such, in a world where the European Union says it's looking to de-risk, that is, reduce its dependency on China, this space going to an ally like Japan, where there's going to be knowledge transfers in the space of semiconductors, to, of course, take leapfrogging steps in this technology, exchanging transfers. We know that the European Union is going to be supporting companies, Japanese companies wanting to operate in the European Union. So this is really countering China's progression in this space as well. China, of course, which the European Union has designated as a systemic rival.
OK, Christine, do stay with us because there's another story I'd like to discuss, and that is the fate of a trade deal between the EU and 4 Latin American countries. Representatives of the Mercosur trade bloc, that's Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay and Uruguay, have kicked off a meeting where they'll be discussing whether or not to sign a trade pact with the bloc. The agreement has been 20 years in the making, but is far from a done deal. Among the biggest stumbling blocks, EU demands for environmental protections in the Amazon rainforest.
The Brazilian forest, plagued by illegal logging, both for the wood itself and to make space for valuable cropland. During former President Bolsonaro's rule, deforestation reached unprecedented levels. Now there's hope for change with President Lula da Silva. The EU is also hoping for more from the Mercosur trade agreement. But Brazil's president has been critical of Brussels' plans to add more environmental requirements to exclude trade in products grown in deforested areas, crops like soy.
The
premise of mutual trust must exist between strategic partners, not mistrust and sanctions. The European Union approved its own laws with extraterritorial effects, which modify the balance of the agreement. These initiatives pose potential restrictions on Brazilian agricultural and industrial exports. These are the members of Mercosur, although Venezuela's membership has been suspended. In 2019, Mercosur countries agreed on a deal in principle with the EU, but the deal has stalled. And along with it, the goal to create one of the world's largest free trade areas with around 700 million people. Last year, the EU exported goods worth 56 billion euros to Mercosur countries, and it imported goods worth 64 billion euros. It was the EU's first trade deficit with Mercosur countries in years. Europe wants access to important raw materials from Latin America for its energy transition. Materials like lithium, which is used to make batteries, an especially important component for the auto industry. But the trade agreement is controversial in Europe. Some countries, including France, Austria, and the Netherlands, fear that their farmers will lose out to agricultural imports from Latin America. Meanwhile, environmentalists believe that the trade deal will result in more pressure on the rainforest and hurt global climate goals. Finalizing the agreement will be tricky for the Spanish government. It holds the rotating EU presidency and is tasked with a deal by year's end.
Christine, this deal is back on the agenda in part because Spain has recently taken over the presidency of the Council of the EU. How is Madrid hoping to convince fellow member states to get back on board?
Well, Kate, as you rightly point out, Madrid's taken over the European Union Council presidency for the remainder of the year. And we know that this is high up on Madrid's agenda. This is something that the Spanish themselves have set out to accomplish by the end of the year. We know that Spain highly favors getting this deal done, as does Brazil and other countries on the other side as well, Kate. It's going to be a matter of resuming that momentum that the European Union and Mercosur countries had achieved in 2019. That was, of course, before the stalling, largely because of European Union concerns over deforestation in the Amazon that really reached record levels under the Bolsonaro administration. With President Lula coming in, that seems to have changed. There seems to be a momentum on that side. But of course, there are other issues, and Madrid really is going to do everything that it possibly can to make sure that all those hurdles are cleared come the end of the year.
So, Anna, given that there are a lot of issues on both sides remaining, how do you assess the chances of the agreement being signed by the end of this year?
Kate, because of the willingness that's been signalled by both sides to pick up momentum, to get this deal done, it is very possible. However, we've got to be realistic about some of the difficulties. And now the latest sort of hurdle, if you would like, is coming from Brazil. President Lula is concerned particularly about the fact that the deal allows European Union countries to sell to the public sector. He wants to reserve public sector contracts to small, medium enterprises in Brazil, and that's something that he's likely to dig his heels in for. He also wants to reserve or exclude European Union companies from the public sector. We know, for example, on the EU side, you've got countries, member states like France, who are looking particularly out for their agricultural sector to protect their farmers. Of course, this would allow more imports coming in from Latin American countries. So there was hopes that at a big summit with Latin American countries and Caribbean countries happening here in Brussels later this month, that there would be a significant announcement in terms of progress having been made. But given this latest sort of hurdle on the Brazil side, with President Lula seeking to add some counter proposals into the deal, that might stall progress. But there is good faith. There is the willingness. It will be up to Madrid's persuasive powers, those sort of like bringing the sides together, reaching those further compromises. What it does need, of course, is for the European Union to maybe walk back. We heard from President Lula of Brazil recently in Paris saying, this paternalistic attitude in terms of how we're negotiating here. We want good faith. We want to be equal partners here. So it appears Spain will be pulling member states on this end to perhaps reaching further compromises. But again, possible, very likely, but will be difficult to do. But if you hear from the Spanish, it's something that they're going to do their utmost best to accomplish.
All right, so a diplomatic balancing act ahead. Christine Mahandra, thank you so much.